Defender stood up. The tone of the room shifted. He wasn't loud or theatrical. His voice was calm, almost tired, but carried a weight of deep compassion. "Your Honor," he began, "this is a 12-year-old girl with no stable home, no family, no place to go. She wasn't trying to cause harm. She was searching for safety, for something familiar. What she needs isn't punishment. She needs understanding. She needs someone to care." He turned briefly to Leela, silently offering her strength before facing Rebecca again. "Let's not give her another record. Let's give her a chance." The room murmured softly. The contrast was stark, one side labeling her a delinquent, the other pleading her humanity. But in Rebecca's ears, only one sentence repeated itself, louder than the rest: "You're my mom." Her pen hovered over the file, but she couldn't bring herself to write. Finally, forcing her voice into the room, she said sharply, "I don't know what you're talking about." It came out too fast, too defensive. The words betrayed her internal chaos. In the back, reporters began scribbling furiously. One whispered to another, "Did she just deny it?" Gloria Adams, the social worker assigned to Leela's case, watched quietly. She had seen many courtrooms, many children broken by a system that was supposed to protect them. But something about this felt different. She saw the tremble in Rebecca's fingers, the tension in Leela's shoulders, and the truth swimming beneath the surface of this confrontation. When Rebecca called for order, banging her gavel, her voice didn't carry the same command it usually did. The courtroom obeyed, but the energy had changed. Every glance was sharp, every breath shallow. Rebecca looked down at the file again, but the words blurred. Her heart pounded. Her past, so carefully locked away, had been dragged into the light by a girl with her same eyes and unrelenting pain. She could feel Leela watching her, not as a judge, but as a daughter. The silence returned, heavy and unforgiving, as the weight of a single truth, long denied, settled over them both. Leela sat quietly at the defendant's table, her small fingers fidgeting against the edge of the wood, her shoulders stiff with tension. Across the room, the prosecutor rose to his feet, his voice sharp and unwavering as he recited her past, minor offenses, warnings, previous trespassing reports. He called it a pattern, painting Leela not as a lost child, but as a repeat offender who refused to respect boundaries. The courtroom listened in silence, each word adding weight to the judgment hanging over her. Leela's eyes dropped, not in shame, but as if preparing herself for the storm she knew was coming. Then her attorney stood up, a weary but kind public defender who had seen too many kids fall through the cracks. His voice didn't rise, but it carried strength. "Your Honor," he said, "Leela isn't here because she's dangerous or malicious. She's here because she has no one, no stable home, no family. She wasn't breaking into a house. She was walking through a neighborhood she thought might lead her to someone who once gave her life." He paused, letting the silence emphasize his words. "This child isn't a threat. She's a question left unanswered. She's just trying to understand where she came from, and why she was left behind." Rebecca stared straight ahead, but the words pierced through her, more than she wanted to admit. Her heart beat heavily behind the armor she had worn for years. Suddenly, Leela shifted in her seat. Slowly, she stood. The room held its breath. Her voice was soft at first, but resolute. "I've been through so many foster homes," she began, her gaze unwavering. "Some families were kind, some weren't, and every time I packed my things, I kept hoping, maybe this time someone would stay. Or maybe," her voice wavered, her fingers gripping the table, "maybe my real mom would finally come for me." A reporter's pen stopped moving. The entire room had gone still. Leela inhaled shakily. "But you didn't come," she said, eyes locked onto Rebecca. "You didn't even try." The judge's chest tightened. She lowered her gaze, but Leela continued. "You don't even recognize me now," she said louder. "Was I not enough? Was I not worth it?" Her voice cracked but held strong. "I just wanted to know why." Her words didn't shout, they cut. Rebecca sat frozen, her professional mask slipping by the second. She had no words. Only guilt and a rising tide of regret that years of silence could no longer hold back. Leela took one final step forward, her voice barely a whisper, but everyone heard her. "I just wanted you to try." The strength in that single sentence struck deeper than anything else. Rebecca opened her mouth slightly, as if about to respond, but nothing came out. Her hands trembled, her throat closed, and as the judge who had sentenced countless people sat in silence, it became clear, this moment, this confrontation, was her own trial. The courtroom didn't move, the walls seemed to lean in, and the girl before her, so small, so strong, had finally said everything her heart had carried for 12 long years. Rebecca sat alone in her chambers, the heavy oak door closing behind her with a finality that echoed louder than any gavel strike. The silence was overwhelming, pressing in on her like a tidal wave. She leaned against her desk, hands gripping its edge as if the solid wood could somehow ground her. But nothing could steady the storm rising within. Leela's voice still rang in her ears, sharp, trembling, undeniable. "Was I not enough? Was I not worth it?" Over and over, the words repeated like a haunting refrain. Rebecca closed her eyes, and suddenly she wasn't a judge in a robe, but an 18-year-old girl again, standing in her parents' living room, the air thick with shame and fear. Her father's voice had been cold, harsh. "You've ruined your future. Rebecca, do you even know what this will do to us?" Her mother, usually the gentler one, had sat quietly, her eyes downcast, whispering, "You're too young. You can't raise a baby. This is for the best." Rebecca had wanted to fight, to believe she could be a good mother despite everything, but the pressure, the guilt, the expectations crushed her spirit. A week later, she signed the papers. The memory of handing her newborn over to a social worker was etched into her soul, the tiny fingers wrapping around her thumb, the silent plea in her baby's eyes as she was carried away. And now, that same child, older, wounded, was standing in her courtroom, asking questions Rebecca had spent a lifetime running from. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had built her life on control, on justice, on order, but all of it felt hollow now. She had achieved everything, degrees, respect, a seat on the bench, but none of it erased the ache in her heart. A soft knock on the door broke the silence. Rebecca didn't answer at first, hoping the moment would pass, that she could stay hidden. But the knock came again, firmer. "Come in," she said finally, her voice low and uneven. Gloria Adams stepped in, calm and composed, holding a folder in her hands. She closed the door gently behind her and approached. "Judge Hart," she began gently, "do you have a moment?" Rebecca nodded stiffly, masking her turmoil behind a professional facade. Gloria sat down across from her and placed the folder on the desk without opening it. "It's about Leela," she said softly. "She's been in the system her whole life, bounced from home to home. Through it all, she's held on to one hope." Rebecca's eyes flicked toward the folder, but she didn't reach for it. "She's been drawing," Gloria continued, her voice tender. "Hundreds of pictures, all of them the same, of a mother she's never met. A mother she imagined, hoped for, someone who would recognize her." The words cut through Rebecca's chest like glass. Slowly, she reached for the folder, her fingers trembling. Inside were pages of sketches, some crude, drawn in crayon on wrinkled paper, others more detailed, more desperate. Each one showed the same image, a woman with kind eyes, open arms, a face imagined but full of love. Gloria's voice softened further. "She just wants to know you. That's all she's ever wanted." Rebecca couldn't speak, her throat burned, her eyes blurred. She looked at the drawings, each one a piece of Leela's broken heart laid bare in lines and colors. Gloria paused, letting the silence speak. Then, gently but firmly, she said, "You've spent your life bringing justice to others. But what about her? What about Leela?" Rebecca's defenses cracked. "It's not that simple," she whispered, voice strained. "I don't know how to fix this." Gloria leaned forward, her voice steady with conviction. "Most kids never get this chance. But Leela found you. This is your chance to stop running. To make it right. She stood, her words lingering in the air. She's waiting, Judge Hart, but she won't wait forever. Then she left, closing the door behind her, leaving Rebecca alone with a stack of drawings, and a truth that could no longer be denied. Rebecca remained seated in silence long after Gloria had left, her eyes fixed on the drawings scattered across her desk. Each sketch spoke louder than any words Gloria could have said. They were raw, vulnerable, and heartbreakingly sincere, a child's attempt to piece together the face of someone she had never truly seen, but always believed in. Some drawings were simple, stick figures surrounded by hearts or houses. Others were more vivid, colored with hope, outlined with longing. One showed a mother kneeling down, arms outstretched, waiting to catch a little girl running toward her. Another had the mother lifting the child into the sky, both smiling under a sun drawn with childish yellow rays. Each stroke felt like a cry for connection, and it crushed Rebecca to realize that all this time, while she had been building a life of order and prestige, her daughter had been quietly waiting for a love that never came. Her hand trembled as she picked up one of the pictures, a messy crayon sketch of a faceless woman with her arms wrapped around a little girl. The lack of a face struck Rebecca deeply. Leela had imagined everything: hair, clothes, gestures, but had never known what her mother looked like. It was as though Rebecca had been a ghost haunting her child's imagination. Her breath hitched, guilt welling so powerfully in her chest it nearly choked her. She had told herself for years that she made the right decision, that she was too young, too unprepared, that giving Leela up had been the responsible thing to do. But the justifications felt hollow now. Rebecca had never allowed herself to wonder what Leela looked like, never followed up, never even checked, and yet, this girl had drawn her, over and over, as if trying to bring her to life through sheer hope. Rebecca reached for another drawing, this one more chaotic, the lines frantic, smudged, drawn in haste or desperation. It showed a woman with no face standing behind bars, and a child reaching for her from the other side. Her heart clenched. Was that how Leela saw her? A distant, unreachable figure trapped behind the cold wall of silence and abandonment. Her fingers brushed the paper as though trying to smooth away the pain etched into the page. For so long, Rebecca had hidden behind her black robe, her gavel, her reputation. She convinced herself that justice for others would somehow atone for her own past. But looking at these drawings, she knew, justice didn't erase pain. It didn't replace presence. Leela didn't need a judge. She needed a mother. The thought struck like lightning. All this time, Leela had been reaching out through every sketch, every foster home, every question left unanswered, and Rebecca hadn't just missed it, she had turned away. Tears filled her eyes, finally spilling over. They blurred the edges of the drawing she held, but not the truth staring back at her. She wiped her face and sat up straighter, her mind reeling with memories she thought she had buried for good. The moment she gave Leela away, the weight of her father's disappointment, the silence of her mother's absence, the emptiness that followed. But Leela had not faded into the past. She had fought her way back, into this courtroom, into Rebecca's life, with nothing but courage and the unwavering need to be seen. And now, for the first time, Rebecca saw her, truly saw her. The drawings were no longer just artwork. They were lifelines. They were pieces of a girl who refused to forget, who refused to give up on the possibility that maybe, just maybe, her mother might come back. Rebecca stood slowly, as if moving too fast might shatter her resolve. She gathered the drawings carefully, holding them close to her chest. They weren't just paper and crayon. They were a message. It's not too late. Her feet carried her to the door, and she paused for a moment, hand on the knob, heart pounding. The hallway beyond was still and quiet, but no longer intimidating. It was the path forward. With every step, the shame began to loosen its grip, replaced by something unfamiliar but powerful: hope. Maybe she couldn't undo the past, but maybe, just maybe, she could still change the ending. The atmosphere in the courtroom was almost unbearable as Rebecca re-entered, the air thick with anticipation. Every face turned toward her with a quiet intensity. Leela sat at the defendant's table, small but resolute, her hands gripping the edge as if bracing for impact. Her eyes never left Rebecca, searching, steady, filled with a painful mixture of fear and determination. Rebecca took her seat, but she no longer felt like the figure of authority she had once embodied. The file in front of her was a blur of words she couldn't read, because what mattered now couldn't be found on paper. The scraping of Leela's chair suddenly cut through the silence as she stood. Her voice, though trembling, rang through the room with clarity. "If you don't want me," she began, "just say it, right here, right now." A murmur rippled through the gallery before being silenced again by the weight of her words. She stepped forward slightly, her hands shaking, but her voice growing firmer with every sentence. "But if you ever thought about me, if you ever wondered where I was, why didn't you come? Why didn't you try to find me?" The question hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and charged. Even the reporters, pens poised mid-air, were frozen by the gravity of her plea. Rebecca's head lifted, her eyes finally meeting Leela's, and for the first time, she allowed herself to really look, not at a defendant, not at a mistake, but at her daughter. Leela's voice cracked, but she pressed on, refusing to break. "You had a choice," she said, her tone sharper now, "and you chose to leave me. Do you know what that feels like? To wake up every day wondering if you were the reason someone gave up? If maybe you just weren't good enough for them to stay." A sharp gasp broke the stillness, quickly hushed, but the emotion that filled the room was unmistakable. Rebecca's breath caught in her chest. She wanted to speak, to explain, to reach out, but all the excuses she had prepared over the years felt empty now. Powerless against the truth Leela was demanding. "I just want the truth," Leela said softly but with undeniable force. "Because I can't keep wondering anymore. I need to know why." The courtroom was dead silent. Not a whisper, not a shuffle, only the echo of that final plea. Rebecca's carefully constructed mask, held firm for so many years, began to crumble under the weight of it. Her fingers gripped the arms of her chair, knuckles pale, heart pounding. She looked at Leela, truly looked at her, and saw not just the pain, but the strength it took to stand there and speak those words. In the gallery, Gloria sat still, her hands clasped tightly, silently willing Rebecca to respond, to finally step forward. And then, at last, Rebecca stood. The room tensed as she rose, her figure suddenly seeming smaller, more human. Her shoulders sagged under the burden of truth. She met Leela's gaze, her lips parted, and her voice, when it came, was soft, broken, but real. "I was wrong," she said, "so wrong." The courtroom held its collective breath. Rebecca looked down, her eyes stinging with tears she could no longer hold back. "I was scared," she continued, her voice trembling. "I was 18. I didn't know how to be a mother. Everyone told me giving you up was the right thing, that it would give you a better life. And I believed them. I told myself you'd be safer, happier, without me." Her gaze returned to Leela, open now, no longer guarded. "But they were wrong. I was wrong." Her voice cracked completely. "I was too afraid to face what I had done, too ashamed to go looking. And I thought maybe, if I stayed away, it would hurt less. For you, for me." A quiet gasp came from the gallery, followed by stillness. Rebecca's tears now fell freely. "But I never stopped thinking about you. Not one day. And I'm so sorry for making you feel like you weren't enough, because you were. You are." Leela's grip on the table softened, her eyes wide, glistening with unshed tears. The courtroom seemed to breathe again, the tension lifting ever so slightly as the truth poured out. Rebecca drew in a shaky breath, her voice steadier now but still drenched in emotion. "If you can forgive me, I want to try. I want to be the mother you deserved all along." The words hung in the air like a bridge stretched between two hearts long separated. Leela's lip trembled, and then, finally, she whispered, "I just wanted you to say it." And with that, the courtroom, once frozen, softened, as something broken finally began to heal. The courtroom lights had dimmed and the crowds had dispersed, but the weight of the moment lingered as Rebecca stepped into the quiet hallway. Just ahead of her walked Leela, small and fragile, but with a posture that radiated a strength far beyond her years. Rebecca hesitated for a second, then quickened her pace to catch up, her heart pounding not from fear this time, but from something deeper, hope. "Leela," she called softly, her voice trembling as it crossed the space between them. The girl turned, her eyes still wet, guarded but open, waiting. "I want to try," Rebecca said, her voice firmer now, despite the quiver in her chest. "I can't undo the past. But I want to be there for you now, if you'll let me." Leela didn't respond right away. She searched Rebecca's face, looking for sincerity, waiting to see if this, too, would be taken away. And then, slowly, she nodded, her lips pressed together to hold back another wave of tears. In the weeks that followed, Rebecca began to shed the rigid layers of her former life, the strict schedule, the emotional walls, the illusion of control, and instead leaned into something she had long denied herself: motherhood. She filed a formal petition to gain legal guardianship of Leela, fully aware that the process would be complicated and emotionally taxing, but more determined than she had ever been. She didn't just show up in courtrooms anymore. She began showing up for Leela, in everyday moments. In quiet spaces. In the simple acts of presence that spoke louder than any verdict ever could. At Leela's first community art showcase, held at a local center, Rebecca stood quietly in the back, her heart pounding as she watched people stop to admire the drawings that had once been Leela's private expressions of longing. The sketches no longer depicted a faceless mother, they were now rich with detail. Filled with warmth, filled with recognition. People moved slowly from one piece to another, visibly moved, as though they too could feel the story within the lines. And then Leela took the small stage, her voice soft but steady as she thanked the audience for coming. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on Rebecca, who gave a small smile through tear-filled eyes. For a brief moment, they held each other's gaze, no words. Just the silent understanding of two people who had walked through pain and chosen to meet again on the other side. Rebecca clapped, her hands shaking slightly, overwhelmed by the significance of it all. She had stood in courtrooms for years, handing down sentences, making life-altering decisions. But this simple moment of standing in the audience for her daughter, was the most important one of all. She didn't stop there, determined to make up for the years lost. Rebecca took time to learn about Leela's world. She discovered her favorite foods, the songs she hummed when nervous, the way her eyes sparkled when she talked about art. They met weekly at Leela's favorite diner, sharing milkshakes, awkward silences, and slow-growing trust. Every moment, no matter how small, became a brick in the bridge they were building, one step closer to healing. It wasn't always easy. There were days when Leela would pull away, when fear resurfaced, when the wounds of abandonment reopened. But Rebecca didn't run. She stayed, she listened, she kept showing up. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just doing her duty, she was living her responsibility. She was being a mother, not in grand gestures, but in the daily promise that she would not walk away again. In time, Rebecca learned to love differently, unconditionally, without needing to be perfect. She embraced the messiness, the vulnerability, the courage it took to love someone who had every reason not to trust her. And slowly, Leela began to believe, not just in Rebecca, but in herself. Their story was no longer one of separation and silence, but one of reunion, effort, and quiet, steady redemption. The gallery buzzed with quiet admiration as visitors moved slowly from one artwork to the next. Their voices hushed as though reverence had settled over the space. Among the crowd stood Rebecca, no longer in her black robe, no longer hidden behind titles or formality, but simply present, just a woman, a mother, tracing every detail of her daughter's world with wide, humbled eyes. Her gaze wandered until it landed on a painting set apart at the far end of the room. It was different from the others, larger, warmer, painted not with searching but with certainty.